My son-in-law laughed, thinking he'd won my company until the DNA proved my daughter wasn't mine. It was supposed to be a celebration, the inheritance meeting Ruth had set up before she passed. The table gleamed, the documents stacked, the coffee still warm. My daughter, Lily, sat beside her husband, Brandon, both dressed like they were posing for a corporate brochure. For years, I'd built Hale Mechanical from sweat and fire, the kind of work that left scars under shirts. Now, they thought they'd inherited it like a watch or a vase. Brandon leaned back, smirking. The company's ours now, old man. Time to retire. Lily's smile was thin. It's better this way, Dad. You'll finally rest. I looked at them, then at the lawyer standing by the door. Read it. He opened the sealed envelope. Per the verified DNA report, Miss Lily Whitmore is not Mr. Hale's biological child. Silence. Brandon's smirk collapsed. Lily whispered, Dad? I sipped my coffee. I told you blood doesn't build a company, work does. I guess 99% of you will hear this, sigh, and scroll past, not clicking like or subscribe. Even if it only takes a second. What time is it for you? And where are you listening? They say every downfall starts small, a hairline crack in a perfect wall. You don't see it at first. You feel it. A faint tension in the air, like the moment before glass gives way. That morning, I felt it before the sun was up. I'd been on a service call since 5. One of those emergency heating jobs no one remembers except the family who wakes up warm. By 7:30, the Lincoln was idling outside my daughter's condo. I had a Starbucks pike in the cup holder, and the Wall Street Journal folded beside me, mortgage rates circled out of habit. 30 years running Hale Mechanical had wired that kind of routine into me, early, steady, ready. The lobby doors whispered open with that expensive hush new buildings have, the kind meant to keep out noise and ordinary people. White orchids lined the entryway. The scent of truffle oil leaked in from the restaurant next door. A concierge I didn't recognize nodded politely, but not too warmly, the kind of nod that measures your shoes before your name. Then I saw it. Brandon's BMW parked in my spot. Not technically mine, maybe, but always left open when I visited. I stood there longer than I should have, coffee cooling in my hand. A small thing, but small things have a sound if you listen, like a crack forming in plaster. Upstairs, the elevator doors slid open, and out came Brandon. Perfect hair, espresso cup in hand like it was a prop. Lily followed, smile bright and brittle. Dad, you didn't say you were coming. Her tone had a new sharpness, city edges where warmth used to be. Finished an early call, I said, holding up my thermos. Thought I'd stop by. Brandon's eyes dropped to my jacket, the stitched logo, Hale Mechanical, veteran owned. He smirked, swirling the last of his drink. Still doing installs? That's cute, Walt. Times change. We're moving Hale Mechanical into real management. Less hoses. The word hung there. Cute. Like the work that saved lives was a hobby. Lily touched his arm, laughing too quickly. Dad, it's just efficiency. You don't have to be on ladders at your age. My age. Efficiency. New words. Polished, empty ones. I said nothing. The omega on my wrist ticked steady, same as the day my wife gave it to me. The concierge pretended not to hear. Maybe he was trained that way to ignore small humiliations between rich families. The elevator doors closed behind them, soft as a sigh. I stood there, staring at the white orchids. One petal was bruised, almost black near the edge. I don't know why I noticed that, but I did. Maybe because everything that looks perfect hides its damage in the corners. On the drive home, CNN murmured low through the car speakers, static under the headlines. I barely heard it. My mind kept replaying that moment, his smirk, her smile, the quiet insult they thought I was too old to catch. At a red light, I pulled out my notebook, the one I keep in the console. Wrote down 3 names, Brandon, Lily, Hale Mechanical. Then underlined them once. Not hard, not angry. Just to remember where the crack began. Service used to mean something. It still does to me, at least. I took the long way home, past the firehouse where I'd started as a kid. The garage doors were open. The red engines gleamed like they always had. Men younger than me checked hoses, valves, air tanks. Nothing cute about it. Nothing outdated. Just work that mattered. When I got home, I set my coffee down, looked at my hands steady, still capable, and whispered to myself, "It's just a crack." Then I paused. But cracks spread. I told myself it was just a hairline crack, and then I watched it spread. Summit Oaks Country Club smelled like money, pretending to be modest lemon polish, white linen, and the faint tang of champagne sweating in cut glass. It was a Saturday morning dressed in civility, the kind where laughter comes prepackaged and everyone knows which fork to use. I pulled up in my Lexus, the same one I'd driven for 8 years, clean enough to look respectable but not new enough to draw attention. The valet opened my door with the same tone of politeness he gave to regulars who tip 20 but never smile. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," he said, but his eyes flicked past me to the BMW pulling in behind. "Ah, Mr. Whitmore," he said again, warmer this time. Brandon smiled like he owned the place. Maybe he thought he did. Inside, the maitre d' beamed. "Right this way, Mr. Whitmore." He didn't look at me when he said it. The brunch crowd glimmered. Golf shirts crisp enough to cut, women with manicured nails tapping at iPhones, laughter bouncing like polished silver. Lily waved from a corner table. Her friends were already there, young professionals, curated smiles. I could see it before I sat down. Brandon was hosting, not joining. He'd picked the seats, the menu, the narrative. "Walt," he said, rising, hand outstretched like a campaign photo. "We were just talking about Hale Mechanical. Big quarter ahead." I shook his hand. His grip was too light. The waitress poured coffee I didn't order. Lily leaned forward, voice bright. "Dad, we were saying it's time to think bigger, modernize, expand. Brandon has ideas." Brandon turned to the table, his smile widening. "Q3's the quarter we modernize. Hale ERP, new CFO, bring in my guy from Scottsdale. Walt deserves to rest." He didn't look at me. He spoke to them, the audience. That's how soft coups work. You make the decision sound like it already happened. One of Lily's friends, all pearl earrings and polite ambition, murmured, "Oh, that's generous." The table chuckled, polite laughter like the sound of paper tearing. Lily lifted her mimosa, eyes not quite meeting mine. "It's time," she said. That was the moment, the first public betrayal. Small enough to pass as progress, sharp enough to cut. I set my iPhone down beside my plate, slow, deliberate. I didn't sign anything. Brandon's smile stayed, but the corners of his mouth twitched. A hairline crack of its own. "Not yet, sir." The room heard the "sir." They always do. It was a weapon disguised as respect. Conversation shifted. Someone asked about stock options. Someone else mentioned summer in Scottsdale. I let them talk. I stirred my coffee, black, and watched how they nodded at him. Not one person asked me about the company I built from nothing, the men who worked through Christmas storms, the hospital contracts that kept fire systems alive. No one asked because Brandon had already written the story. I was the retiring founder. He was the visionary. The waitress brought another round of drinks. "You're quiet, Walt," she said gently. I smiled back. "Just listening," I said. In truth, I was memorizing. Every face, every name, every laugh that followed his jokes. When the bill came, Brandon grabbed it with a flourish. "Company card," he said. "My company card." Lily didn't notice. Or maybe she did. When we stood, he clapped me on the back. "We'll make you proud, old man." The phrase hit harder than he knew. I looked at my reflection in the mirrored wall behind him. My face didn't move, but my thumb found the Mont Blanc pen in my pocket, Ruth's gift. Back when we could still joke about contracts and signatures. Not for signing today, for drawing lines. Outside, the valet handed Brandon his keys first. I slipped on my sunglasses, watched them drive off, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The air smelled of lemon polish and betrayal. I told myself to breathe. If they wanted the room, I would give them a stage. Midtown always hums at the same frequency sirens, somewhere far enough away to sound safe, traffic layered under the air conditioning ducts, voices muffled behind glass. The kind of white noise that makes bad news sound like business. I sat in the corner office of Levin and Baird, watching sunlight slide across the glass table. Margot Levin had that precise energy. Only real attorneys have sharp, steady, no perfume strong enough to distract from the ink on her fingers. She was my late wife Ruth's age when we first met her, back when we couldn't afford her hourly rate. Now, she just bills me quietly, like a doctor with an old patient. She flipped a chaste statement across the table. "They're front-running you," she said. Her tone didn't change. New accounts. Pre-drawn transfers. Looks like they're moving vendor deposits before the board transition. I nodded once. So we slow the front. Margot pulled another folder from the stack, flipped it open with her nails tapping like a metronome. Irrevocable trust for voting shares. Successor trustee, you. Emergency bylaw operations, control under critical safety. Your company installs fire protection, right? That qualifies for the public safety exception. It lets you maintain control during disputes. Write it, I said low. She studied me for a second. No emotion, I like that. Then she signed her initials on the corner of the page, slid it forward for mine. I uncapped my Mont Blanc, the one Ruth gave me on our 10th anniversary, and signed. Ink bled a little on the paper grain. Nothing dramatic, just permanent. Margot closed the folder, stacked it neatly, and reached for a small sealed envelope from her briefcase. Cream stock, red wax, stamp. And this, Walt, just in case. I looked at it but didn't touch it. What's in there? Information, she said. Something I'd rather you didn't need. I usually do. Then you'll know when. I slipped the envelope into my folder, next to the trust documents. Didn't open it. Not yet. Outside, the elevator hummed down 40 floors. I watched the city blur through the glass billboards, scaffolding, people carrying phones instead of eyes. The siren started again, closer this time. For a second, I caught the faint smell of perfume. Margot's assistant had just passed behind me, but in that scent, Ruth. Her winter scarf, the one she wore the night she came to my firehouse retirement. My fingers straightened the pen, aligning it perfectly parallel to the paper. A ritual, I guess. Order where there used to be chaos. At noon, I crossed the street to the credit union. The board chair, a quiet man named Harris, met me for coffee in the corner booth. He stirred too long before speaking. We're staying neutral, Walt. But off the record, our loans don't move until governance is settled. You have time. That's all I need, I said. On the drive back to the office, CNN murmured under the city noise. Market tickers, real estate headlines, all static. My reflection in the rear view looked tired but sharp. At Hale Mechanical, my operations chief, Miguel, was waiting by the server room. Everything backed up? I asked. Twice. New admin passwords. Ring cameras online. And I trimmed the key holder list. How much? Half. Good, I said. Keep it that way. He hesitated. You really think Brandon's coming for it? I thought of the brunch, the laughter, the word cute. He already did. When the building emptied that evening, I sat alone in my office. The city outside flickered red and white from passing cars. I opened the folder, checked every signature, then touched the envelope Margot had given me. The paper felt heavy, denser somehow, like it already knew its purpose. I put it back. I left Midtown with a folder that felt heavier than paper. The VFW hall always smelled the same coffee, lemon oil, and memory. Every May we held the Ruth Hale Scholarship Dinner there, in honor of my late wife. She was the one who believed every kid in town deserved a shot at learning something that couldn't be burned or repossessed. By 6 o'clock, the crock pots were steaming, the folding tables were lined up in straight rows, and someone had placed her photo next to a boot full of carnations. The rope on the flagpole outside clinked against the metal, a soft metronome keeping time with the conversations inside. I arrived early as usual. Habit. Some of the old crew was already there, guys with silver hair, faces carved by heat and smoke. Evening, Chief, one said, patting my shoulder. I waved it off. Just Walt now. They never listened. Brandon showed up exactly at 7, right as the speeches started, holding a gift bag with a logo on it like he'd just come from a board meeting. He shook hands, smiled for photos, then leaned toward the MC and whispered something. A few minutes later, he had a microphone in hand. Before we start, he said, voice amplified and slick, I just want to say a few words about my father-in-law. The room went still. I looked at him from the table near the front, coffee in hand. Walt taught grit, he began, pacing slightly. He's from a time when leadership meant running into danger. But today, leadership is strategy. It's about empowering experts, delegating risk, knowing when not to rush in. He smiled, like he'd just said something profound. A veteran at the back coughed, sharp enough to cut through the silence. Another shifted in his chair. Brandon didn't notice. He was too busy performing. Lily sat 2 tables away, fingers around her mimosa flute. She looked up at him, then at me. "Maybe don't," she whispered. He squeezed her hand, eyes still on the crowd. "Optics," he muttered. That word, always that word. When he finished, polite applause followed. The kind of clapping people do when they don't want to start a fight in a room full of casseroles. The microphone passed to me. I stood, the wood floor creaking under my boots, and took it. "Strategy's fine," I said, voice low but carrying. "We need people who plan. We need people who think. But when a sprinkler head fails at 2 a.m., it isn't strategy that shows up." A murmur rolled through the room. A few nods. Then applause real this time, not polite. The kind that comes from somewhere deeper. I didn't look at Brandon. Didn't need to. He was already scrolling his phone under the table, pretending not to be red in the face. Afterward, the scholarship checks were handed out. 2 local kids, one going into engineering, the other into EMT training. They took photos beside Ruth's picture. Brandon stood in the background, smiling that thin, professional smile he'd perfected. Lily clapped quietly beside him. When the crowd started clearing, one of the younger veterans came up to me. "Hey, Chief," he said, holding out his phone. "You might want to see this." On the screen was a video Brandon's speech. His old world heroics line, the coughs, the silence. Someone had already posted it in the local Facebook group. The caption read, "Who mocks firefighters at a memorial dinner?" I laughed softly, more from disbelief than joy. "Guess people still pay attention." He grinned. "Whole town's gonna." Later that night I drove home under the streetlights, their glow soft through the windshield. My phone buzzed twice, 3 times, then didn't stop. Messages, tags, notifications. I didn't open any of them. The flag rope outside the hall still echoed in my head. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of something steady that never forgets how to stand tall. By morning, my phone was full of strangers reminding me who still runs toward fire. The Bank of America branch on Main was colder than usual that morning. Fluorescent light, frosted glass, the quiet click of a printer that sounded like it was counting heartbeats. I sat across from the branch manager, a man who'd known me for years, his expression shifting between confusion and professional restraint. On the desk sat a stack of documents, credit lines, vendor guarantees, and one signature line waiting in blue ink. "Mr. Hale," he said finally, "you're rescinding the personal guarantee?" "Yes." He looked at me carefully. "That will freeze vendor credit for Hale Mechanical." "I'm aware." He hesitated, pen poised. "Everything all right?" "Everything's accurate," I said. He nodded, then signed his part, stamping each page. The sound echoed in the glass room like slow applause. I put my phone on speaker. "Margot, you're on?" Her voice came through steady as ever. "Confirm you're revoking guarantees, shifting payroll reserves into escrow, and notifying all counterparties in writing." "Done," I said. "Good. Document everything." That phrase repeated through the morning like a drumbeat. Document everything. Next call, the insurance carrier. I gave them the short version: governance dispute, pending verification, safety clause invoked. They knew what it meant. Within the hour, the account flag changed from low risk to under review. Brandon's shortcuts overlapping policies, deferred payments were suddenly visible in the daylight. By 10, I was at my desk, coffee cold, reviewing the vendor list. Every contract tied to my personal name went into a hold file. Every open line of credit reverted to cash on delivery. The emails were clinical. "Pending governance resolution. Please transact under COD until further notice." The replies came fast. "Understood, Mr. Hale. Appreciate the clarity." Not one questioned me. At 10:30, my phone buzzed. "Brandon. Brandon, what the hell are you doing?" We had an understanding. I stared at the message for a long second, then typed back. "Put it in writing." 3 dots blinked for a while, then vanished. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the banker's window at a faint smudge near the corner. The sunlight caught it just right, turning it into something like a coastline or maybe a fault line. I traced it with my eyes until it became a map. There's always a route, even through wreckage. You just have to draw it yourself. By 11, my CPA joined the call. "We'll escrow 2 months of payroll," she said. "You'll take heat for it." I can take heat, document everything. Third time that morning. I wrote it down anyway. I took a slow breath. This wasn't revenge yet. This was structure. Framework. The quiet kind of power people forget exists because it doesn't shout. When I walked out of the branch, the manager stood to shake my hand. You know, he said, most people panic when they lose leverage. I smiled. Only if it was theirs to begin with. Outside, the sunlight hit hard against the glass, reflecting back my own outline, older, steady, unshaken. I got in the Lincoln, rolled down the window just enough to feel the air. By lunch, Brandon had discovered what I'd known for years. Respect is a form of credit, and his card had been declined. Ruth always loved this place. The same corner table by the window, the same brass lamp that hummed faintly when the voltage dipped, the same song drifting from the speaker, someone to watch over me, her favorite. I'd called ahead, told them to keep it quiet, simple. Just family. A small dinner to mark the anniversary. Not a celebration, not a ceremony, just remembrance. The restaurant was warm, candlelight catching the edges of wine glasses, everything soft and slow. The maitre d' greeted me by name. Hand over heart. Mr. Hale. The usual table. I nodded, loosening my tie. The chair felt cold through my jacket. The kind of cold that comes from leather that's been polished more than sat on. Ruth's photo hung above the bar, framed in brass. She'd liked it there, the idea that she could still watch the room. Lily arrived first, late by 15 minutes, but glowing with effort. Her dress shimmered, the color of pale champagne. Dad, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Her voice carried that professional lightness people use when they want things to stay easy. You look nice. Your mother picked this tie, I said. Still works. We ordered her favorite salmon, my coffee black. I thought maybe, for one night, we could talk about her mother without the weight of money or control hanging between us. But then Brandon appeared, and he didn't come alone. His parents followed silk scarves, confident smiles, the faint scent of Dior perfume cutting through the room. The maitre d' hesitated, confused, but Brandon brushed past him. We're all family here, he said too loudly. Conversations at nearby tables softened. He reached our table, a leather folder tucked under his arm. Didn't want to intrude, he began, sliding the folder onto the table anyway. But this seemed as good a time as any. I stared at it. You couldn't find a weekday? Brandon's smile was tight. Timing's everything in business. His mother adjusted her scarf. It's best for Lily, really. I didn't look at her. I wasn't aware Lily needed protection. Lily's hands trembled slightly around her wineglass. Dad, please don't start. You said you wanted peace. Peace. The word landed like an insult. Brandon opened the folder. Sign the transition, Walt. You're emotionally compromised. We just need your signature so the process looks orderly. Optics matter. I flipped through the pages. Clauses I didn't write. Voting shares. Succession language. All of it designed to move control without saying the word take. I looked up. This grants you majority control. Brandon's grin widened. Management. Optics. I closed it slowly. No. Silence. Heavy. You could hear the ice settling in a nearby glass. Lily's voice was thin. Dad. I shook my head. Not tonight. Brandon leaned back, exhaling through his nose. You're making this difficult. Good, I said. Then you'll remember it. For a moment, no one spoke. The restaurant kept breathing around us, cutlery clinking. Quiet laughter from the next table. The faint scrape of a chair leg. Then Brandon stood. His parents followed, whispering apologies that weren't for me. As they turned to go, I noticed a young couple at the next table, phone held discreetly sideways, recording. Not for scandal, just curiosity. The kind that spreads before dessert. When they were gone, I stayed seated. Finished my coffee, even though it had gone bitter, burnt sugar on the tongue. I uncapped my Mont Blanc and drew one slow line across the paper napkin in front of me. Not for signing tonight. For remembering. The waitress came by, hesitant. Do you want the check, Mr. Hale? Yes, I said quietly. For all of us. Outside, their taillights vanished down the street, red bleeding into the dark. I could still see the empty chair across from me, candle flickering in front of Ruth's photo. They left with the folder. I left with the room. The office was quiet before sunrise, just the hum of the servers and the faint drip from the coffee pot. I liked it that way. Empty halls meant no questions, no noise, just the sound of decisions being made. My desk light cast a small circle on the paperwork spread in front of me: trust documents, bylaws, employment contracts. The Nest feed on the side monitor showed the parking lot out back, dew glinting on the company trucks. The world outside was still, waiting. Miguel, my operations chief, came in carrying his tablet, voice low. "You're pulling Whitmore's CFO?" "Interim leave," I said. "Conflicts disclosed." "Hey, our sign's at 8. He hesitated. "She's gonna tell Brandon." "She'll try. That's why we changed her credentials last night." He nodded slowly, already typing. "What about payroll approvals?" "Escrowed," I said. "Margot's handling the notice. It goes out in writing, not whispers." Miguel smiled faintly. "You always did like the paperwork more than the yelling." "It lasts longer," I said. He left to execute the orders. I sipped my coffee, burnt, bitter, grounding. Through the glass wall, the first light broke over the lot, painting the asphalt gold. A delivery truck pulled up and began backing toward the dock. The beep, beep, beep echoed through the concrete like a metronome. I felt it in my ribs. Back up. Set. Load. At 6:30, I called Margot. She answered on the second ring, sounding fully awake. "Morning," she said. "I assume this isn't about brunch reservations." "Contingencies," I said. "Freeze on share transfers, notice of meeting under our bylaws at Summit Oaks, and an internal audit trigger. Brandon's inside men are off the board by end of day. That'll make noise. Then it's working." She paused. "Anything else?" I hesitated for the first time that morning. "Paternity." "Paternity?" "Test," I said, privately, for clarity, not revenge, yet. Silence on the line. The kind that means someone's rethinking what they thought they knew about you. "Walt," she said finally, voice careful. "You're sure?" "No," I said. "That's why we test. Sealed until necessary." Margot exhaled. "Chain of custody, hospital lab, results only to me." "Good." I hung up and stared at the steam rising from my cup. Ruth's photo was still on the corner of the desk, smiling the same soft smile she had when Lily was a toddler. That photo had survived 3 office moves and 1 fire. I turned it face down. Not out of anger, out of focus. At 7:45, HR pinged me CFO leave processed, keycards disabled, acknowledgement signed. By 8, the school district procurement officer called. "We heard about the governance dispute," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Safety operations continue as usual. Anything not safety critical hold until it's resolved." She paused. "Appreciate the heads up, Mr. Hale. Most folks try to hide that stuff." "Transparency keeps buildings from burning," I said. After the calls, I drove to the hospital. The lab tech didn't ask questions, just verified my ID, collected the sample, and sealed the envelope with 2 signatures. Chain of custody, just like Margot said. The courier scanned it, placed it in a padded envelope, and slid it into a lockbox. I watched it disappear through the slot, a piece of my life now reduced to paperwork and evidence tape. Outside, the sun had risen fully, glaring off the hood of my car. I sat there for a minute, letting the heat seep in, letting the weight of it settle. Some truths break you when you find them. Some fix you. You don't know which until they arrive. I didn't ask the question to hurt anyone, I asked because a man should know what he's standing on. Summit Oaks had always been too polished for its own good brass that caught every reflection, marble floors waxed to the point of vanity, and a faint citrus scent that clung to the air like expensive denial. I arrived early, as I always did, portfolio under my arm, the same one Ruth had given me the year we signed the first municipal contract. The private salon was already half lit, sunlight slicing through the tall windows and catching the edge of a crack running along the plaster crown, small, nearly invisible. But it was there. Every perfect room has one. Brandon had chosen the setting, of course. He wanted it to feel like a coronation, not a meeting. His Instagram post that morning said as much. Big day for Hale Mechanical. Legacy grows stronger. The photo showed him in the club parking lot, cufflinks gleaming, holding a leather folder that wasn't his. The comments were predictable fire emojis, congratulations, A few heart emojis from people who had no idea what was really burning. When I walked in, Brandon was already there with his Midtown lawyers, two men in suits that fit like statements. They'd claimed the head of the table, laptop open, packets lined up like trophies. Lily sat beside him, posture perfect, expression fixed somewhere between poise and panic. Brandon clapped his hands once, smiling broadly. "Agenda's simple," he said. "Transfer, vote, champagne." I set my leather portfolio down on the table. "Agenda follows the bylaws." His lawyer, the younger one, smiled without showing teeth. "We've prepared draft minutes to expedite things." He slid a packet across the table toward me. Before I could touch it, Margot reached out and stopped it with one perfectly manicured finger. "We'll use ours," she said evenly. She set her own folder beside mine, crisp, labeled, lawful. The temperature in the room shifted by 2 degrees. Brandon laughed lightly. "Margot, always the watchdog. We're just trying to streamline." "Streamlining isn't in the bylaws," she replied. The photographer Brandon had hired adjusted his lens, pretending not to listen. His mother whispered something to Lily, who nodded without speaking. Then Lily turned toward me, her eyes downcast. "Please don't make this a thing, Dad." Her voice cracked on the last word, soft enough that only I caught it. I looked up at the ceiling. The hairline crack traced across the molding, thin but widening where the light hit it. Outside, a faint siren rose in the distance, slipping through the double glass, fading in and out like a memory that refused to die. I counted to 3 and breathed. It always finds me, that sound. Even years after retirement, the echo of it still lands somewhere in my chest. Margot leaned toward me, whispering, "All observers confirmed. Union reps on site, school district council 10 minutes out, credit union chair already in the lounge." I nodded. "Good." Brandon noticed. "What's this, a full audience?" "You didn't need to invite the peanut gallery, Walt. This is family business." "Public contracts make it public interest," I said calmly, "and our bylaws allow external observers for safety and compliance." He smirked. "You love your rules." "They've kept buildings standing," I said. That silenced him for a moment. He tapped the folder. "Fine, but we're voting today." "We'll see," I said, watching him realize that confidence doesn't equal control. The door opened behind us. The union rep entered, nodding to me with quiet respect. Then the district council, briefcase in hand. 2 veterans who chaired local safety committees followed, faces I'd known since my firehouse days. The credit union chair came last, expression neutral but eyes sharp. Brandon's lawyer looked uneasy now. "This isn't a public proceeding," Margot smiled faintly. "It's a lawful one." Brandon tried to keep the grin plastered on his face, but the corners twitched. The photographer lowered his camera. The siren outside had faded completely, leaving only the hum of the air vent and the quiet shuffle of papers being opened. If they wanted an audience, I thought, I would make sure the right people had seats. The week before the meeting felt like a chess clock, ticking under glass, quiet, deliberate, and mercilessly even. Brandon spent it pretending everything was inevitable. Every rumor, every whisper, every digital echo built toward that illusion. He wanted the story of Hale Mechanical to be one of natural succession, the son-in-law who modernized the old man's business. It was cleaner that way if you didn't look too close at the fingerprints. The first move came Monday morning, a post on LinkedIn. "Leadership transition underway at Hale Mechanical. Honored to build on Walt Hale's legacy as we enter a new era of growth." I stared at it on my MacBook screen, the words arranged like an obituary written by a PR intern. I took a screenshot, right-clicked to archive, then printed it. Margot always said, "If they want to tell a story, collect the footnotes first." By noon, my phone was buzzing vendors, employees, old friends asking what the post meant. I replied with the same phrase each time: governance under review, safety operations unchanged, calm, neutral, documented. Wednesday night, Brandon invited me to meet for Optics, a cocktail lounge off Park Avenue, velvet banquettes, amber lighting, the kind of room that forgives dishonesty if you say it with a smile. He was already seated with one of our longest-standing vendors, a man I'd known 20 years. The jazz was low and slow, all upright bass and cigarette ghosts. Brandon leaned back, arm draped over the booth. So, he said to the vendor, we're moving to net 30 for all incoming product. Walt's signing off Friday clean slate. The vendor looked from him to me, uneasy. You good with that, Walt? I sipped club soda, letting the carbonation bite before I answered. Until governance is settled, terms remain cod. You'll have payment in the morning. Brandon's smile went tight. You really want to do this? Publicly? I set my citizen watch band flat on the table. No, Brandon, I want to do it correctly. He looked at me, searching for the old man he could talk over. Didn't find him. The silence that followed was almost kind. When the vendor excused himself, Brandon leaned forward. You're making this ugly. It was never pretty, I said. He smirked, drained his drink, and left without a handshake. I stayed a while longer. The smell of old smoke had baked into the velvet, sweet and bitter at once. It triggered a memory standing in turnout gear at 3 a.m. Steam rising off my sleeves, a neighbor handing me coffee with shaking hands. The kind of gratitude you can't fake. Some things you don't abandon, no matter how many suits tell you to evolve. The next morning, I sent a memo to all staff. Per Section 4 of the Operations Charter, safety procedures remain unchanged pending governance clarification. Continue normal scheduling. Compliance review in progress. No threats, no drama, just procedure. By Friday, Brandon's post had gathered over 200 likes and one critical comment from the local union rep. Funny, it said. Didn't see that vote posted, I smiled. Quiet allies are better than loud ones. That night, I walked home under the streetlights, air cool enough to sting. My phone pinged with ring alerts, nothing unusual. A car idling too long, a delivery at the gate. I let the pings come and go without looking. The city hummed steady, like a heart that knows its rhythm. Brandon thought he was writing a narrative of power. What he didn't realize was that I was already writing the record. If he wanted a story told, I would make sure the footnotes were written first. The diner was half empty, just the way I liked it, chrome edges, vinyl booths that sighed when you sat down, fluorescent lights buzzing like old thoughts. A pie case rotated slowly near the counter, slices of lemon meringue and cherry turning in quiet circles, like planets too tired to keep orbiting. Lily texted at 6. Can we talk? Just us. I picked the diner instead of the fancy seafood place she'd probably suggested to Brandon. Neutral ground. No linen. No optics. She walked in 10 minutes late, heels clicking on tile. Her coat looked expensive, cream wool, tailored but the buttons were frayed at the edges, the kind of wear you only notice when you're looking for it. She slid into the booth across from me and managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad, she said, stirring her coffee even though she hadn't added sugar. This isn't about disrespect, it's progress. Things change. I nodded once. They do. She glanced toward the window, like she needed to find courage in the reflection. We need a line of credit to make upgrades. The ERP system, new fleet, some rebranding. Brandon has contacts. Contacts don't fix boilers, I said. Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. It's accurate. The silence after that wasn't angry, it was tired. She tapped her spoon against the cup, a nervous rhythm she used to have when she was a teenager lying about curfew. She tried again. The school district contract you could vouch. Just an acknowledgement letter, so the credit union can extend the line. It's temporary. The pie carousel clicked. Once. Twice. I looked at her hands. The manicured nails chipped at the tips. The faint indent on her finger where her wedding ring used to sit looser. I'd seen that mark on too many people trying to hold on. When did your world get this expensive? I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked down, blinking fast. You make it sound like we're reckless. I didn't answer. I just waited. She pushed her coffee aside. You don't understand. Brandon's been under pressure since the post went out. People are watching. We can't look unstable. Looking stable and being stable are different things, I said. Her laugh cracked in the middle. You always say things like that, like it's simple. It is, I said softly. Simple isn't the same as easy. For a moment, she looked like the girl who used to build things just to show me how they worked. I saw her at 7 again, glue on her hands, cardboard firehouse spread across the table. Is this how the trucks sleep? She'd asked. eyes wide. I'd told her yes, and I'd meant it, even though we both knew trucks never really slept. I looked back at her now, this woman who'd traded glue and laughter for fear and designer ambition. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," I said. Her lip trembled. "I can't go home and tell him that." "I know." The waitress came with the check. I paid in cash, tipped heavy. Old habits, the kind that don't make sense until they do. We stood outside under the flickering neon sign. The air smelled like fried onions and rain. I walked her to her car. She hugged me tight, almost desperate, and I held her without saying anything. When she pulled away, she looked smaller. "You're really not going to help?" "I am," I said. "Just not the way you think." She frowned, not understanding. I watched her drive off, taillights vanishing into the night like red threads being pulled from a wound. I did not say the one thing clanging in my chest. Tomorrow, the room will tell you the truth. Summit Oaks looked too perfect that morning, brass fixtures polished to a blinding sheen, coffee service laid out like an exhibit, and sunlight hitting the marble just enough to make the place feel theatrical. I arrived before anyone else. Habit. The staff had just finished setting up the salon. The faint scent of lemon polish hung in the air. On the ceiling, the hairline crack I'd noticed last week was still there, tracing across the crown, molding like a thin vein under skin. I found it oddly comforting proof that even the most expensive rooms age. I checked the microphones first. Each one hissed softly, then cleared when I tapped the bass. The slide deck loaded on the screen behind me. Governance and Safety. A dull title. On purpose. I wanted precision, not drama. At the side table, I arranged document packets by name. Board members, council, observers. No champagne, no fanfare, just process. At 9:45, Margot arrived, crisp as always, carrying a slim black box. She set it at my end of the table without a word. "Chain of custody intact?" I asked quietly. "Sealed and logged," she said. Brandon's mother passed by, eyes flicking toward the box. "Finally," she murmured, as if the ending had already been written. Margot didn't respond, but her gaze met mine. We both knew what sat inside an envelope that could turn every seat in that room colder than marble. By 9:50, the others started arriving. My side first. The union rep, in his work boots, wiping his hands with a paper napkin before shaking mine. The two veterans who chaired the safety committees, jackets pressed but still carrying the faint smell of machine oil and aftershave. The school district council, calm and composed, followed by the credit union chair, who nodded once and took notes before the meeting even began. People who didn't need introductions. People who understood the weight of paper. Then came Brandon's crowd, midtown suits, expensive perfume, practiced smiles. His lawyer held a leather briefcase like a trophy. His photographer followed, adjusting a ring light on a collapsible tripod. Lily trailed behind, pale and tense, clutching her bag as though it were armor. Brandon walked straight to the head of the table, flashing his grin like a press release. "Get the handshakes," he told the photographer. "Legacy changing hands today." I didn't correct him, I just nodded to the union rep. "Please sit where you can see the screen." Margot distributed the agendas. Brandon's lawyer leaned toward him, whispering, "This'll be quick." His mother adjusted her pearl necklace. "About time." Lily didn't speak. Her eyes darted between the box and the empty seat beside me, then back to Brandon. She looked like she wanted to ask something but had already lost permission. The clock ticked closer to 10. My Omega's second hand moved in steady rhythm, tick, 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 like a metronome, syncing with my breath. The leather chair was cool against my back, grounding me. Brandon's team placed champagne flutes on a side table. It wasn't subtle. The soft chime of glass hitting glass was almost mocking. Margot leaned toward me. "He's staging photos," she said under her breath. "I know." Across the room, Brandon turned, all performance. "Walt, you ready to make this official?" I straightened the agenda packet, centered it in front of me, and looked around the table. My people were already watching, steady, expectant. Brandon's were rehearsing their smiles. The box sat between us, small and silent, like a verdict waiting for oxygen. At 10 on the dot, I clicked the first slide and said, "Let's begin with the bylaws." The blinds were open now. letting in that sharp kind of winter light that makes everything look more honest than people want it to be. The brass fixtures threw long, clean reflections across the table, cutting through the neat rows of folders and untouched champagne flutes. The room felt colder than before, not from temperature, just air gone thin with expectation. Brandon stood first, always the showman. His voice carried, bright and confident. "Move to transfer majority interest to the modern team," he said, like a man reciting his own coronation. Margot didn't even look up from her notes. "Objection," she said. "Under Article 8, the irrevocable trust retains voting rights under the Emergency Safety Clause. Mr. Hale remains controlling trustee until the public safety exemption is lifted." Brandon's grin faltered. "That clause is obsolete." "Still binding," Margot said. "Filed, recorded, notarized." He laughed, too loudly, the sound bouncing off the glass. "This is pathetic," he said, turning toward me. "You don't even know your own family, Walt." Silence. Even the photographer stopped clicking. The only sound was the faint hum of the HVAC and the low buzz of the projector still showing the first slide, governance and safety. I met Margot's eyes. She gave the smallest nod, the kind that carries the weight of something irreversible. She reached for the slim black box on the table, opened it, and lifted out a single sealed envelope. "At Mr. Hale's request," she began, her voice level and formal, "and for reasons bearing on fiduciary conflicts, the following lab, verified results, chain of custody attached, confirm that Miss Lily Whitmore is not Mr. Hale's biological child." Gasps broke around the table. The sound wasn't loud, but it spread small, human sounds of disbelief. The photographer lowered his camera, staring. The veterans exchanged quiet looks. The credit union chair wrote something down, pen steady. I said nothing. Lily's lips parted, color draining from her face. "Dad," she whispered, but it wasn't a question, and it wasn't denial. Just the sound of something breaking quietly in the air. Brandon's jaw clenched. This is irrelevant." Margot turned to him, still composed. "It is directly relevant to undue influence and conflicts of interest affecting today's votes." Brandon's lawyer shifted uncomfortably beside him. "We weren't informed of any—" "You are now," Margot said. Brandon's mother started to stand, then thought better of it. Lily's hands trembled in her lap. The light from the window cut through the room like a blade, washing color from everyone's faces. A siren wailed faintly outside, far away but rising inevitable, the sound finding me the way it always does. I tasted metal at the back of my tongue. I didn't look at Lily, because if I did, I wouldn't be able to keep my voice steady. "This meeting," I said, calm, deliberate, "is governed by the bylaws and the trust. Not emotion, not appearances." Brandon tried to speak again, but Margot lifted a hand. "The record will show the objection noted and overruled." I nodded once. "Continue." Her assistant documented everything, the timestamp, the reading, the acknowledgement of chain of custody. Brandon's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. But it didn't matter. The truth wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a ledger entry. When the murmurs finally began to fade, I straightened the papers in front of me. Lily's eyes were wet, fixed somewhere between apology and disbelief. I wanted to tell her it didn't change what mattered, but that wasn't mine to give right now. Not here. I clicked the remote. The next slide appeared on the screen. Contracts at risk. When the room finally remembered how to breathe, I advanced to the next slide and said, "Let's begin." The slide on the screen glowed pale blue. Risk and compliance. Dry as dust, but every word on it was a quiet blade. The room, once thick with ambition and champagne shimmer, had gone sober. Nobody spoke above a whisper now. Even the air felt cautious, like it didn't want to pick a side. I stood at the end of the table, pointer in hand, voice steady. "Effective immediately," I said. "The safety exception triggers operations control. All unilateral PR about leadership is rescinded. Contracts remain frozen until a compliant board seats." The words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. The slide behind me did the work. Bullet points, dates, statutes, the kind of truth that doesn't blink. Across the table, Brandon's lawyer looked as if he'd swallowed something sharp. Brandon himself stared at the screen, trying to read faster than reality. The photographer had lowered his camera. The champagne on the side table sweated quietly in its ice bucket. The union rep cleared his throat. If a sprinkler head fails because management rushed optics, he said, my guys walk. It landed like a gavel. The veterans at the back nodded, one folding his arms, the other writing something in his notebook. Next came the school district council. She closed her folder, leaned forward slightly, and said, we will not renew under disputed control. Public safety procurement requires verified governance. The credit union chair adjusted his glasses. Protective covenants are active, he said calmly. Until disputes resolve, financing is paused. No raised voices, just the sound of paper turning, of agreements quietly evaporating. Brandon gripped the edge of the table. You can't do this, he said, voice cracking at the edges. Margot looked at him evenly. He already did by the bylaws you ignored. The silence that followed wasn't sympathy. It was recognition. Everyone in that room knew what had just happened, a system withdrawing its trust, one clause at a time. I turned back to the screen. As of this morning, I continued, vendor preferences are rescinded. All existing credit lines revert to standard net 15. Safety operations continue. Everything else paused. My Omega ticked in the quiet. The projector hummed. Brandon sank back into his chair, fingers twitching at his cuff. That's when I saw it. A loose thread, bright white against the navy. It caught the light, fluttered slightly when his hand moved. For reasons I can't explain, I couldn't stop seeing it. That single thread, frayed and inevitable, unraveling while he still pretended the fabric held. Lily sat beside him, pale and unmoving. She hadn't touched the water in front of her. Her wedding ring sat loose on her finger, spinning slowly as she twisted her hands. The meeting continued, procedural and cold. The credit union chair asked to go on record. Risk posture updated as of 10:43. The district council echoed, noted for audit. The union rep signed his statement. When it was done, I said, meeting adjourned. Brandon didn't stand right away. His mother whispered something sharp in his ear, but he didn't react. Lily rose, quietly gathering her papers without looking at anyone. The observers stayed behind union, district, credit union, each one shaking my hand before leaving. No congratulations, just acknowledgement, respect without sentiment. When the door finally closed behind the last of them, the only sound left was the slow crack of ice from the untouched champagne bucket, tiny fractures one after another, echoing like distant tremors. The champagne never made it to glasses. The ice kept cracking like a tiny earthquake. It started the way these things always do now, not with a headline but a post. One parent in the neighborhood watch group uploaded the video clip from the scholarship night, Brandon's hoses line. The sound was tinny, the lighting bad, but the tone was unmistakable. The caption said, "Who mocks firefighters at a memorial dinner?" Then it spread. PTA moms, veterans, small business owners, comments stacking under the post like sandbags before a storm. Not giving my PTA dollars to people who sneer at safety. My husband's company uses Hale Mechanical, we're staying. Service isn't outdated. It's the reason we're all still here. The moderators tried to slow the discussion, but it was too late. Every share carried the same undercurrent: safety, honor, community. Not scandal, not DNA. They talked about values, not blood. At the VFW, Gianni found me where I always sat, same stool, same chipped counter. He looked at me over his glass of iced tea. "You didn't swing, Walt. You just let the room see." I nodded. "Rooms do fine on their own." He grinned. "You remember that electrical fire in '02? You told me don't yell, just pull the plug." "Still good advice," I said. By late afternoon, my phone started buzzing again, but this time it wasn't questions. It was support. Vendors reconfirming contracts. The district superintendent's office emailed to reaffirm cooperation with compliant governance. The credit union posted a short, neutral note. Operational prudence and continuity confirmed. Dry. Professional. Perfect. Meanwhile, Brandon's LinkedIn page shifted tone overnight. Gone were the photos of champagne flutes and legacy in transition. In their place, a carefully worded statement about temporary governance review and mutual respect. It landed like wet paper. His comments filled with silence. His contacts didn't share. They just vanished. Lily's accounts disappeared altogether. No posts, no profile picture. The last thing she'd written, a photo of a coffee cup captioned "New Beginnings," sat frozen in time. By evening, the local radio station ran a segment about the importance of integrity in public contracts. They didn't name names. They didn't have to. The world shrinks and expands in strange ways when you stop defending yourself. I spent the evening the same way I'd started it, quietly. The house hummed its small domestic sounds. The refrigerator motor, the settling of old wood. I poured Starbucks grounds into the filter, the familiar smell rising like memory. Silence can cut, but sometimes it stitches. There's silence with edges, and there's silence that heals. That night, mine leaned toward the second kind. Outside, dusk draped over the yard. Cicadas started up, loud and steady, that late summer chorus that always sounds like the earth remembering itself. I turned the sprinklers on. The hiss of water across grass filled the air, steady, rhythmic, honest. The same sound that had opened every morning at the old firehouse when we tested the hydrants. A neighbor walking her dog waved from across the street. "Glad you're still running things, Walt," she called. I smiled. So am I. The water arced through the fading light, small rainbows forming and dissolving in the mist. My phone buzzed once more, another message from an old supplier. Full support, always. Inside, the coffee finished brewing. I poured a cup, leaned against the counter, and let the quiet settle in again. By morning, Brandon's phone would be full of silence, the most expensive sound in business. The doorbell rang just after 8. I was still in my flannel shirt, coffee half gone, the house too quiet for company. Through the glass, I saw her Lily. No makeup, no jewelry, just her, smaller than I remembered. She held nothing in her hands. No purse, no phone, just herself. I opened the door. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Can I come in?" We sat at the kitchen table. The morning light came in low, catching the steam off the 2 mugs between us. She wrapped both hands around hers like it could steady her. "I was 22, she began. I told myself it was harmless. It wasn't. It was stupid and selfish, and I ruined things before I even knew what they were." Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry yet. "I lied to you because I couldn't bear being less." I kept my eyes on the rim of my mug, tracing a chip in the glaze with my thumb. "You're not less," I said quietly. "You're mine, even if the blood test says otherwise." But, Lily, boundaries. That word hung between us like something living. She wiped her face. "Tell me what they are." I reached for the folder beside me and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. On it were 4 lines typed, double-spaced, signed at the bottom. Counseling referrals. Weekly sessions for 6 months. Proof of attendance filed with Margot. Repayment plan. Money taken under false claims to be restored through structured donations to the scholarship fund. Governance restriction. No role or representation in the company for 2 years. Public apology. A statement to the crews, acknowledging the harm caused by deception and misuse of influence. I uncapped my Mont Blanc, underlined each one as I read aloud. The nib made a soft scratching sound on the paper. She nodded, after every line, her lips pressed tight. When I finished, she whispered, "Okay." Then, after a pause, "Do you hate me?" I looked at her, the same tilt of head Ruth used to have when she was asking forgiveness for something small like a forgotten anniversary. "No," I said. "Hate's lazy. I just don't carry what isn't mine anymore." Her hand shook as she signed. The pen left a faint ink smudge on her wrist. She stared at it like a bruise. The house stayed still. Somewhere outside, a delivery truck beeped in reverse. That rhythm again, back up, set, load. For a moment, I wasn't here. I was 28 again, holding her as a baby, asleep on my chest in the recliner after a double shift. Her hair smelled like crayons and milk. My throat closed. I didn't move. When she slid the paper back to me, it wasn't with shame. It was with something closer to surrender. "I'll do all of it," she said. "And if it takes longer, I'll still do it." "That's not punishment," I told her. "It's structure. We build from it or we don't." She nodded. "I understand." We sat there a while longer, saying nothing. The coffee went cold. Sunlight reached across the table, hitting the edges of the signed page, turning the ink a dull blue. When we finally stood, she looked lighter. Not happy, but unburdened in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager trying to build cardboard firehouses in the living room. We stacked our mugs in the sink like two people who still believed in dishes and, maybe, repair. The VFW hall smelled the same lemon oil, chili, and the faint sweetness of carnations. A year had passed, but the boot beside Ruth's photo was back on the table, filled again with color. The rope outside tapped the flagpole, steady as breath. Inside, chairs scraped, coffee poured, and people settled into their seats with the low murmur of familiarity. Families, veterans, the crews, the ones who stayed. Lily stood near the podium, paper in her hands, though I could tell she wouldn't use it. Her hair was pulled back, her voice already shaking before the mic even found her. "I confuse status with worth," she began. "I hurt the man who raised me, and I hurt the people who keep this town safe. I'm sorry. I'm earning back trust slowly, with work." It wasn't rehearsed. It was small, plain, and clean. The kind of truth that doesn't need polishing. Applause didn't burst, it built, starting with the back tables, rolling forward like a tide that refused to stop at her feet. She stepped down. No tears this time, just the faintest nod when she passed me. The crews at the first table shook her hand. One of them, an old firefighter named Gomez, said, "You showed up? That's half the job." Then it was my turn. I walked up to the mic, my notes folded in half inside my jacket, untouched. The wooden podium was scarred with old scratches, proof that time doesn't erase, it layers. "Service isn't a brand," I said. "It's a habit. When sprinkler heads fail at 2 a.m., someone drives. When boilers cough in the middle of winter, someone shows up. Tonight we fund that someone." A veteran near the door called out, "We see you, Walt." I nodded. See each other. That's the point. There was laughter, soft and real, the kind that lives in throats, not in headlines. We handed out the Ruth Hale Scholarship. The recipient, a tall, quiet kid whose father was a night custodian, walked up, shook my hand like it mattered, and held on for a second longer than most people do. In his other hand, he clutched an envelope with the new clause. "Every recipient shadows our crews for one midnight shift. To see service, not just accept it." He said, "I'll be there." The applause came again, gentler this time, like warmth settling into old wood. As the night wound down, people moved toward the crockpots, filled plates, laughed in corners. No cameras, no speeches, just talk. Lily helped stack chairs. The veterans lingered by Ruth's photo, telling stories that stretched back decades. Margot dropped by briefly, left a donation envelope, and disappeared before anyone could thank her. Outside, the rope on the flagpole kept its slow rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. I looked at Ruth's picture one more time. I could almost hear her voice, steady, practical, the way she used to say, "Keep the papers. Papers keep promises." We had kept them, in every sense that mattered. I turned off the hall lights, one by one, until only the small lamp over Ruth's photo remained. The glow hit the boot of carnations, softening the red into a kind of memory. When the hall emptied, I stood at the doorway a moment longer, listening to the quiet hum of the building. Not the silence with edges the kind that used to cut, but the other kind, the kind that holds. Then I locked the door and left one light on over Ruth's picture, enough to find your way in, never so much you forget the dark.